But absolutely amazing testimony. Why Africa?
Well, I think it came back to when I was brought into the church by these old gentlemen. One thing they said, you need to be water baptized.
Okay.
And there, as I was water baptized in my wife's father's church,
Right.
there, these old men, they had a very strong prophetic ministry. And there, basically, they started prophesying over some of the things, that God had for my future. And part of that, the word of the Lord came through two of these old men, that God would send me to the southern tip of Africa, the continent of Africa.
Okay.
And then they brought that I would come as like a nomad, and that I would travel through Africa from South Africa into the continent of Africa, and that I would be a revivalist, and that I would train men and equip them, but also that the fire of God would go with me.
Right.
And that is where I would spend the rest of my life, being based from, and go into the nations of the world out of Africa, because they also said that God would mold me and develop understanding of who He is, and the anointing of God would be molded within dealing with the people of Africa.
Wow.
My goodness.
And so, it took, I took that word, but it took 18 years. I thank the Lord that it took 18 years, because I wasn't ready. God had to prepare me in the work of the ministry, dealing with people, learning about church structure, learning about pastoring people, building churches, the experience of ministry. And if I had come years beforehand, I wouldn't have been able to endure or understand or know how to handle what I'd been through in Africa.
Right.
And so, God has perfect timing.
For sure.
Ecclesiastes chapter 3:11 says He makes everything beautiful in His time.
Right.
And so that's what it was. It was a preparation for Africa. And then God spoke to a prophet in Ghana that I'd known and ministered with, and he said to me about 6 years before, he said, God is preparing you, and the time is nearly up where you will come and you'll be based in South Africa. And he says, I will ring you when the time is right. Okay. And so he phones me out of the blue about 6 years later, and he just says, God is saying the time is right. Now, he didn't know we had the Kansas City Prophets in our city.
Okay.
And they were having a conference in my city that I was in New Zealand, and I wasn't at the conference, but they called me. They said to the pastors there's a man here, he's not here, this is who he is, this is his ministry, God's got a word for him. So the pastors bring the Kansas City Prophet to my house, and they knock on my door, and there it was. They just prophesied over me that now is the time to come to South Africa, and God is placing you now. Now gird up your loins and get ready and go. The time is right. And so from that, God got our attention. And so
there you are.
We packed our bags, and here we have been.